Yeah.
Hello and welcome to
That was me.
Nerdarchy. For nerds by nerds. I'm Nerd Steve, and today I'm joined by Barker and Tim from Absolute Tabletop. How are you guys doing today?
Good.
Fantastic.
How are you?
I'm doing awesome. So what are we here to talk about today? If you guys want to introduce yourselves and let us know what's going on.
Sure. Well, Tim, you introduce yourself first. I
Okay.
have an idea.
Sure. I'm Tim Carney, and I am the art director and one of the co-founders and devs over at Absolute Tabletop. And I'm excited to be here talking about our third adventure kit, which are modular adventure toolboxes. And it's called The Battle for Arctur's Vault. And so that is me. I am Tim. And I'm excited to show more people how these kits can be used in tandem to run endless campaigns.
Yep. My name is Barker and all of that. I'm not the art director. I am also a dev at Absolute Tabletop. And I'm thankful to have Tim to be able to translate my meandering peripatetic ramblings into art. Good art. And so this adventure kit is on Kickstarter now. All the viewers, I believe, should have the link, right, Dave? They should be able to click on it.
In the description,
So
yep.
it's in the description. Go ahead and click on it. And what I want you to do, so you really fully comprehend what we're talking about, I want you to mute us and I want you to spend 1.5 minutes watching that Kickstarter video. And we're gonna BS. I got something to tell Dave and Tim here that's pretty amazing. You can always rewind it later. Watch that Kickstarter video now so you know what we're talking about. And go. So I do things in my sleep. One of the things I do in my sleep is walk. I talk. I also eat peanut butter in my sleep. This is very unique to me, I think. And this morning I woke up with a crossword puzzle almost completely finished. It's an easy mode crossword puzzle, almost completely finished, that I have very little memory of doing. And so I need help. I need help from both of you.
Did you get the answers right?
I have one. I apparently have one left. I couldn't get this one. It's a I misread it. Merrill Sheep on Sesame Street or Lamb Chop.
I am just baffled that you can do crossword puzzles in your sleep.
Yeah, same.
Me too.
I mean, struggle to do them awake. So.
Clearly I can't. Dave. Clearly I can't. But now I know the answer because it's not Meryl Streep, it's Meryl Sheep, and that's EWE.
Yeah.
Boom. All right.
There it is.
Did you hear the ping?
That is super crazy and weird.
Of me beating the crossword puzzle.
It just makes me think of Step Brothers, though, to be honest with you.
Oh yeah.
Do you put like pillows in the oven and or couch cushions in the oven and then like empty the refrigerator?
No, but I'll tell you what. That's a I have sleepwalked. I'm a person who sleepwalks, and
that's dangerous.
It is. It makes me afraid because I'm like a vivid dreamer, and so we're very specific about like, where is the baseball bat that we defend the house with or whatever, like we don't like, or or beyond that. It kind of
you need a werewolf frame.
A werewolf
where you chain yourself up for the full moon.
There's a ritual circle that imprisons me. Like something out of the Dresden Files.
So I would do some things in my sleep, maybe a little bit of talking, and like if my wife would come into the room and I'm already asleep, especially when I used to do like martial arts, I would just I would start like doing stuff in my sleep, or like waving a pillow at her.
That's fantastic.
And I have a buddy that teaches martial arts, and like he's woken up to his wife punching him in the face because he's like armbarred her. It is.
She's tapping out.
Yeah.
It's
not good. Not good.
What a thing to have happen in your sanctum of safety and rest.
Yeah,
by the most like trusted and prized person in your life.
Hey, speaking of a sanctum of rest and plethora and abundance and sanctuary, welcome back, everybody, from watching the Battle for Arcturus Vault Kickstarter video. That's the book that we're talking about, and also I think the modularity, like Tim said, Dave, I think that that's kind of the primary subject, how these can be used together, which was the ultimate goal, I think, of adventure kits, was the combining them into doing different things, which made it difficult when we just had one, right? So we made one adventure kit, and it was a really cool visit into a part of Dragon Grin that was kind of wide open. We didn't have to get too specific about things because it can be overlaid into Dragon Grin. It's really cool, high, like fantasy, undeath. It's called Oath of the Frozen King, right? Pretty rad, pretty D&D style. And then the next one was Lovecraftian, still kind of like leaning on a trope, but a little bit different. Eldritch Madness. We saw that we could, put in madness tables in adventure kits, and that would be a cool tool that can be crossing over. And that was its own kind of standalone setting. This is the first adventure kit that we've released that leans heavily, at least in appearance, on the setting that it's in, which is the hyper magic setting of Enkea, and is fully built for being fully built. Obviously, there are still a couple places because we want some feedback to make sure it's the book that the backers want.
Right.
It's built to be reskinned as low fantasy or high fantasy or middle fantasy. I don't know if you remember, Dave, the last time we chatted about this project, I explained the world to you and you said, yeah, I can't tell if that's high fantasy or low fantasy. And I thought that was like a 3-point shot from beyond the arc. That was exactly what we're going for, because it makes it easier to reskin. So I think that's what we're talking about today.
Yeah. So I remember when you guys did Oath of the Frozen King, and I think Jake from Mini Domain Terrain, I'm probably butchering it, I always mix up which words go where. I feel like he ran that adventure in every which way you could run it. Like, I thought there was like a bunch of like different themes. I think he did like fire instead of ice, and I always just remember him putting up different promos for that adventure.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of the kit, is that at its core, it's a separated, distributed, like, here are the locations, here are the monsters, here are the NPCs, and here are the encounters. Now, starting with the second kit, we built you a starter version so that you don't have to do it all from scratch, but you can do it in any combination. So if you have, the town square of Drift Chapel, and the encounter is the deep ones, that's going to be very different if you have somewhere like the Dripping Caves and the encounter is lighting the lamps. And you can just, with those 4 pieces, encounters and locations, you can just mix and match and make, and then you add one more piece of sauce, which is like, oh, this different monster is here, or this different NPC. And it's really endless. And then every adventure kit has a toolbox in the back, which is basically this endless generator where you can generate traps and new monsters and different minor locations, major locations. And it's all 5e compatible at a high level. It's not deep 5e mechanics, but it all works with the math of 5e. So it's also really easy to use in other systems as well, or just run a 5e game on the fly. So,
and so this adventure kit, what is the theme for it?
The theme of this adventure kit, at its very, very core, is subterfuge and investigation. The battle is the centerpiece, the impending doom, the what is coming if you fail, if you succeed in certain ways. I say fail and succeed, and I put these in asterisks or quotation marks because the concept of failure and success in this adventure kit is completely ambiguous. This is an adventure kit where you can talk people out of their wretched plans. This is an adventure kit with, in each adventure kit, we always have that section at the end, where to go from here. What happened? How do we proceed to help you turn your adventure kit into a campaign, or at least turn the end of that experience into a seamless transition to whatever you're going to do next. And so it would be wrong of me to say that there is not a battle centerpiece happening, because it's coming. It can be stopped. It can be fought in. Sides can be chosen. And to really hang a lantern on that battle, we are including our own cinematic mass combat rules, which we feel strike the perfect balance of, which we feel, let me phrase it this way. We feel that other mass combat rules tend to let us down because they don't give us what we actually want, which is to feel like we're in the mud and the muck and the people, and that we are dealing with an immersive environment. A lot of times we have to rules will lean too heavily into miniature gaminess, or we have to kind of homebrew our own system to feel like there's a battle happening. This system takes elements off of any character sheet, no matter the system, and applies them to a system agnostic framework that involves rolling dice that will give a narrative to provide you the ability to tell a narrative story about the battle that's happening and the people that are in it, while also including stakes and roles and what happens when you lose the prized sword that you've been, holding on to, preparing, sharpening for this battle. What happens when it snaps? These things, the application of stakes to the battle is completely done by the players, so they can decide what they want to have a chance of losing, whether that be a weapon, whether that be their life, or perhaps a story arc that they've slowly but surely built about courage versus cowardice, or which side they've chosen. And you watch as the system progresses, as they have to choose between these things and decide how this pinnacle event in the campaign is going to affect their character, maybe even permanently.
Are the kits set for specific levels, or are they built for different levels? How does how does that work for someone that hasn't experienced an adventure kit before?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the way that they work is the math for the adventure kits uses the 4 primary tiers of 5th edition's mathematics. So, you have levels 1 through 4, and it's like those 4 levels at a time. All of the math, because this is available to us through many resources in the Dungeon Master's Guide. But one of the easiest ways to see this is in the monster creation rules in the original Dungeon Master's Guide, as well as the trap rules. You can see sort of the damage ranges and things of that nature. And thankfully through, bounded accuracy, we know what a character of a certain level is going to be on average, and the math that rolls into that. So these kits are very easy to scale to any level because of the toolbox in the back. So we have the monster set with a certain set of abilities and sort of like mid-level, you'd say. But in terms of like tuning it up, all you have to do is just flip to the toolbox, look to see what level your players are, and then replace a few different stats and then go from there. Same thing goes with the traps or anything else. And so anything mechanically can also be bolted right onto the kit. So you could ignore our monster stats. You could flip through any of the resources that are available right now and say, I'm going to use this monster or these traps or anything that's party appropriate. But the beauty is the encounter is still there. The NPC's motives and all that rich story, that's the hard stuff to come up with. That's all done for you. Stat blocks are easy to pull. Coming up with a story and a location and why is this interesting? That to me is the tricky part as a DM. So the mechanics take a middle seat, I would say. Not the front seat, not the back seat. They're in the captain's chair of the minivan of the adventure kit. So that's kind of how you would tune it.
So obviously charts and tables are very important to you guys. Do you have a favorite?
Favorite roll table?
Yeah.
In all of our adventure kits, my favorite roll tables are the dice drop generator. If you don't know where to start the game, we, again, like Tim said, we provide you the format. You want to run this right away? Here's the locations. Here's how we recommend putting them together. Here's how to react easily if the party goes in their own direction. But we have at the beginning of each adventure kit a dice drop generator that applies each die to and its result to one of the locations and encounters. And you just take the dice and you drop it on a piece of paper. And not only have you chosen through those roll tables the encounters and locations, you've made your map of Drift Chapel, where all those dice are sitting is that map. So you've generated kind of the layout of the dungeon in Oath of the Frozen King, the town in Shadows over Drift Chapel, Adrian Pass, which is a larger region in the Battle for Arctur's Vault. And so you can always move those around. And I think that combination of inspiration and kind of freedom makes those my favorite tables, but it's not an easy choice.
What about you, Tim? You got a favorite roll table?
I would. So I definitely think that I agree with Barker. If I had to choose a second favorite, it's a very sort of niche, like drilled down roll table, but I really love. I have in front of me, and it's the. There's a roll table in all of our adventure kits inside of the rewards section. It's like resolutions and rewards. And the reason why we include this is like, yeah, you want treasure, but there's also like social rewards and stuff in there. But the treasure section is so thematic to me. So like it's a little flintlock and it's a little fantasy. So like it has things like ornamental snuff box. Inside this ornate wooden box, you find a handful of strong smelling herbs. The herbs can be smoked to avoid rolling on the madness effects table. It's like, it's just neat little stuff like that. Anointed pistol, things like that. And so I was really pleased with the interesting entries on that just were kind of like neat little things you can find that are very thematic. I think as a player, I love picking something up from the world. It doesn't have to be a magic item, but now I have this thing and I'm looking for like role-playing advantages and like cool moments to have in character with those things. So I think the resolutions and rewards section and those roll tables in Drift Chapel.
I just love the fact that AbTab's solution to going mad is to get high.
That book was developed by Matt Click, and he's in the chat raising his hand. Yeah, well,
that's hilarious.
But we carry the mechanics I feel to different levels, different wavelengths. Like Tim was just talking about with that one. It's not, we could have just given. You can always just give a +1 weapon. That's all. I love the that example. The +1 weapon is it's a reward and it's fun and you can use it. But what if it also tells you direction when a certain constellation is in the sky? What if by possessing this weapon, you're wanted by a team of bounty hunters? What if this weapon was exhumed from an ancestral grave and you kind of have this side mission to find the family that should inherit it and present it to them? These are not mechanical. In my opinion, they're better. They're better than mechanical because the mechanics, like Tim's saying, it's easy for the DM to say, okay, we're going to give this a little bit of acid damage. We're going to let you see in the dark with this weapon. No, we're contributing with our rewards and resolutions, especially in the Battle for Arctur's Vault, which is kind of going to contain a little bit more in that regard. We're putting a narrative there that can, as much as you'd like, adjust the rudder of your session, your trilogy, or your entire campaign.
No, one of my favorite tables in the DMG is the one that is like, it just adds traits and features to the standard magic items. And part of that is they're just lore stuff like who made this? What is it made of?
Right.
So, it takes like a very mundane thing that, while useful, like a +1 sword, makes it more interesting. And I had used that and built something and put it into the game for one of my players. And, they realize it belonged to a certain knighthood. So they have been dreading going to where that knighthood is from because they don't want to be seen with the weapon.
See, that's awesome.
Just little things like that.
Objects that have stories are exactly what nostalgia is. Like, something is worthless to one person and it is invaluable to another person just because of experiences. And this has been proven. They did a research study. I think this is fantastic. This is actually, Barker, this is in a book you recommended to me, Steal Like an Artist. They talk about how they took and they got a bunch of stuff from yard sales and thrift stores. Like, that looked interesting, that kind of neat, you know, it wasn't junk. They then turned around and sold it on eBay, crafting these elaborate stories of why it was important and what it meant. And they made something like 3,000% profit on it just because the story, someone connected with the story, and then they bought the object off of eBay. And so that's proof right there. And so as a player, that's what it is. This is the story of this dagger. It's so much cooler than just like, here you go. It does a D6 of damage instead of a D4. You know, people don't remember that. That's not the player story that they tell 10 years from then. They don't tell about how the dagger had more damage. They talk about the cool way that they had to face this knight in the tavern because they were caught with a sword.
Yep. That's what Harry's being nice. Harry Pollitt's being nice in the chat about be a better weapon master. And I think be a better weapon master too. This has just been a thing from AbTab. This has been our shtick for a long time. Just like creating fun lore that goes behind something that can change your game. And I think that was my favorite part about about this process of creating the cinematic mass combat rules, is that it's all that. I mean, it takes your character sheet and allows you to use it in a narrative way, but it really is, it's a campaign changing event and a person changing event. And those are my favorite items for sure.
What do the mass combat rules look like? I mean, it's super tricky for it to not just turn into like a mini game, you know, and have it, you know, still be meaningful.
Sure. So I'll tell you this, that it involves, right now it's called the series system. And it involves rolling all of your dice and using those dice, corresponding them with each other to create narrative moments, kind of like a chemical reaction. You take a stocked armory with a pile of bodies, and you combine it to make arrows falling from above to that have like just collapsed an entire flank of troops. This is a really quick example, so I can say that each die, it corresponds directly with something off of your character sheet or something that's important to your character. So, Dave, your character in your D&D game, what are you bringing to the battle that you are going to use?
So my halberd, my trusty halberd, of course.
Your trusty halberd, of course. And we'll just go ahead and say that there's another aspect of your character that has spent the previous sessions deciding whether or not you're going to fight. Maybe this is an ideological thing, but you know that the battle's coming now, and you've decided to take the halberd and give that to the D12, and you're taking your wishy-washy, not wishy-washiness is a little putting it too lightly, but you're taking your ideological sway and applying it to a different die. Let's say both of those dice are threatening to be lost. And now you have to choose. Am I going to lose my trusty halberd by having it smashed to bits by this gigantic ogre and their mace? Or am I going to run and decide this is not for me? I'm not fighting this anymore. I'm out of here, and thereby completing that story arc and changing your character forever. So to answer your question in a very nutshell, succinct way, as succinct as I could possibly be,
right? Yeah.
It takes, you apply these things from your character sheet and your character to individual dice. And these dice currently in the current iteration of the system rotate around a circle with different spaces that are slowly filled with elements of the battle: the wall, the armored troops, the battering ram, the death from above, courage or cowardice. These can be as enigmatic or specific as you'd like, because the objective is to eventually, when you roll these dice, you're going to have 3 different elements connect and provide you with a narrative story to tell about your character immersed in the battle, fighting it.
So how is that going in playtesting? I mean, obviously you're using that, but
Sure.
I'm trying to picture it. It sounds a little complicated. It also makes me think of what are they called? Oratories? The the big mechanical things that are like solar systems and planets.
Orreries.
Orreries, yeah. Yep. It's actually anyone who looks at my channel can and my Twitch channel especially, or the Inspire the Barks or Inspire the Story, will find my story wheel, and it's based on that. It's a wheel with spaces that you fill in, and the dice move from space to space. The complexity that you mentioned, it was very complex earlier on. We had dice, I had playing cards, I had cards that like were battlefield arenas, and a lot of the play testing has been almost exclusively about making it less complicated, because the more complicated it is, the more, like you said, Dave, it turns into a mini game. Okay, we're going to stop playing this and we're going to play this mini game, and then the dice will pan out, tell me what I lose, and tell us who wins the battle, and then we can be done. That's not what we want. We want you to feel like you're boarding up the gate that the battering ram has just broken through. We want you to feel like you're rallying the troops and getting on your horse and leading your squad, which is its own die, into the fray. And so that's totally on point, that we don't want it to be complicated. And most of that comes down to, we want it to flow. The better it flows, the more you can dedicate your focus to the immersion and less to the dice. Very simple. The dice mechanics right now are very simple resolutions. The complicated part, nothing about it is complicated at this point. I guess you could say the complex parts are that you can determine how to narrate your actions based on all of these corresponding elements in your own way. It's totally your choice.
And the thing too is, like, as someone who's been in a playtest of it, I think it's one of those things where it's harder to explain than it is to do.
Yeah.
Because it has a sheet that kind of handles everything for you. It's this printout that is the player guide, and it's very simple to follow because you see it in front of you. It's almost like if I was trying to explain a board game to you and you couldn't see the board. It sounds really complex. I'm like, yeah, and then there's a little square where you put a card, and then next to it, there's a picture of your character. It's like, as someone who played tested multiple versions of it, once it clicks, you're like, oh, okay, I get it. And then it's like, okay, flow. So the beauty of it too is that, look at any awesome combat scene that's a mass combat scene from a movie, and it is a mixture about every 8 seconds of zooming in and zooming out. That's kind of a hack, is like, oh, wow, show the scope of the battle. Look at the stakes. Okay, now show a character doing something important. Okay, now look at, oh, wow, there's a lot of soldiers here. And then, okay, this is a, stabby kind of fight off the horde moment. That's what this system does really well, is that you can sit and kind of play it. And one moment you're, saving Private Ryan, there's a tank, crossing the bridge and like firing off. But then the next moment it's an intimate sort of scene in a stairwell, and a German soldier is slowly plunging a knife into your chest and shushing you, like it can be a lot, but it's really flexible and super simple. So, and I'll also mention this, there's also going to be some really great stuff in the toolbox that glues this directly to 5th edition. So like, you're going to have everything you need for what we're calling cinematic mass combat. So it's not a miniature game. It's not mass combat rules. It's what you want to see in a movie. I want to feel like I feel watching, the Two Towers. I don't want to set up for 20 minutes and then feel like I'm rolling a bunch of dice and playing Warhammer. I want to feel like I'm playing Lord of the Rings in the movie. I'm Aragorn, so that's kind of what we're trying to build.
Totally makes sense. Do you remember when Wizards did the Unearthed Arcana and took a stab at mass combat?
Do we remember?
I do. And this is, I don't want to talk too much, but I was just going to say, this is coming from someone who Mike Merles has a love for some deep mechanics. I don't know if you saw his Unearthed Arcana about his initiative system that was randomized with the different dice.
I've seen all the Unearthed Arcana, I'm pretty sure.
So
Yeah.
So you could tell he's a bit of a gearhead when it comes to that kind of stuff. He enjoys a little bit of crunch in his granola. And so it wasn't surprising that that is the mass combat system that he came out with. But it was essentially, to me, a half-baked Warhammer system or something. Like it didn't fully work as an RPG mass combat system, and it didn't fully work as a miniature game. I'm not saying terrible. I could do better. Yeah.
I think we ran a couple scenarios just to see what it was like. And like the outcomes were like wildly swingy and didn't make sense.
That was my biggest beef with it, is it was so swingy that I thought this won't work with 5e because it itself is its own swingy ecosystem. And then you're going to add it. I don't know. It was interesting.
But yeah, we did have some fun toying with it at any rate. I mean, the way you guys are describing your cinematic mass combat is kind of like, it's kind of how like we've done it, but minus the mechanics, right? Like usually there's like an overarching thing going on, and then we like do all these zoomed in moments, or even like I've done even much more simple. Like, all right, everybody, somebody can be a commander for the round. It doesn't have to be the same person. Guys can switch it around and make them make just something I was calling a leadership role. And like, depending on how they did with that role determined like how well their side did, what their casualties were, what casualties they inflicted. And it was just super dumbed down, roll a D20, add your charisma to it.
Yeah, it's for my group, it was a lot of, okay, when you're narrating, fighting this one enemy, start by narrating killing 3 others just like them, and then roll against that last one. Kind of like just, it really became about playing pretend that we're in a battle.
Yeah.
And what you mentioned, Dave, is so important, because this system that we're developing will allow for you to be a PFC, a private first class, in the thick of it, like listening to their commanders and doing, hitting the front, fighting in the front lines, and also the ability to have a squad with you or control entire flanks of this battle. And the way we've done that is what I mentioned earlier, how fluid it is to just take a concept like a cavalry platoon. It's not a very I don't think platoon is the right term, but or like a platoon of halberd wielders, and apply it to a die. And one of my favorite things to do is to apply NPCs and allies to dice, because that makes it personal when you're choosing what you're going to keep and what's going to be lost in the fight, because something's always lost. That's the cinematic part of it. Something's always lost, even if the fight is won, and we're including multiple ways to determine how the battle ends, right? But something is always lost or gained. The characters evolve, and the campaign changes because the characters evolve. It might even be less about who wins and who loses the whole battle, and more about what happens to each individual person and their losses. How the battle for Helm's Deep convinces Aragorn in that climactic point that he needs to reclaim the throne of Gondor. He needs to fulfill his position, and that was more about him than the outcome of the battle. And so we've leaned heavily into that intimate feeling of each character's experience, while still giving you the ability to give this, like Tim said, to zoom out and then zoom in. We actually have a mechanic called passing the torch. It's also there's a mechanic called the gaze, where you can gaze across the battlefield at the explosion, the exploding deeping wall, right? And that is its own transitionary period between your turn and another character's turn. So there's been a lot of iterative rules that we've created, and some of these are going to be optional rules in the toolbox, because, as we've been talking about, these can't be complicated. They really just have to be a framework to follow, to allow the characters to show their own character evolution in the system of mass combat.
And it also has to fit in the book with everything else.
Yep. Not lost on me.
Yeah.
Indeed.
How many pages are you guys shooting for with the adventure kit?
Most of our adventure kits go from like 60 to 70. Tim might be like, well, everyone watch Tim's face because I don't know.
I don't know. I was going to say 800. I was kidding.
So it's a 4-volume series, Dave. I don't want to break 100. The whole, and that's including the blank pages, the table of contents, everything, because so much of the adventure kit is its ability to be used on the fly and be easy to use, easy to flip through, easy to carry. And we don't want it to be this huge tome because it has to be streamlined for prep free or prep light environments. So we're trying to keep it under 100. I think we're going to accomplish that.
Yeah, no weird faces here coming from the guy that put out a nearly 500-page book.
But you're telling me I got 400 more pages?
So you're telling me there's a chance? No, I think that's the beauty of the adventure kit too. Is like, and I happen to have one next to me because I was using it. But we also make sure that it's got big, sort of wide open spaces. So that 100 pages always feels flexible and light. It doesn't feel like you're looking at a wall of text. We have things clearly laid out with a lot of negative space, but there's plenty of content too. So that 100 pages is still going to feel nice and, easy to use, easy to digest. It's very visually parsed so that you can see it's all like different tables and stuff. This is Adventure Kit, Shadows over Drift Chapel. But like you'll see, we make sure that there's some nice boxes. Everything has some nice just color coding and things like that. And this was all by design. We worked really hard on the trade dress for the adventure kits to make sure that they were parsable, and what do I mean when I say parsing? I mean, you can look at it and you don't have to stop and go, wait, what am I looking at? There's really, so 100 pages of that is still like, oh, wow, this feels, it's like eating a bag of chips. You can eat a whole bag of chips and you're like, wow, that didn't feel like 5,000 calories.
For real.
You won't gain weight by reading these books.
No.
So
you were muscle.
The same So you've used the same format throughout all three. So if you're familiar with one, the others should be fairly easy to use.
Yeah, we try to take another step with each adventure kit, and so and this is twofold mainly. One, there's always a space in the beginning where we can put something that we want, right? So Shadows over Drift Chapel, Flintlock rules, and that filled that space that was kind of setting specific. In this one, massacre rules going to take a little bit of that space. But it's also, we're kind of, instead of just providing kind of a resolution and reward section filled with tables, we're providing a few actual rewards. We have 3 primary rewards. The first one is a spoiler. The second one is a musket that is it's called the Stanich 4 prototype musket, which can be reskinned as a crossbow again, like we talked before, but it uses this arcane essence inside a loading crystal to fire different types of shots. And then of course, because I'm me, once the loading crystal is empty, it pops out and goes ting. And then the second
part is very important.
It's so important. It's so key, man. It's pivotal.
And thing. Then the other item is a sword from that was exhumed from an ancestral grave, presumably. And the cool thing about the sword is there's some mechanics to it, but it's a falchion, and all of the, usually you get a magic item with like 3 abilities, 3 mechanical elements to it. And in this time we have 2 very narrative game-changing elements, and then we add a little bit of mechanics to it. So it's a narrative heavy item, which I'm really proud of.
You guys know where you're going after this adventure kit, where the fourth one will be?
We never know where we're going. But no, we've been talking a little bit.
Yeah, I think Matt's, yeah. Go ahead. You might know more than me.
Well, no.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So
I
we
don't
do
know
have
what- yeah.
we do have an idea. We do have an idea. Probably not our news to share,
Yeah.
but we do have an idea, and well, I'll just give you a hint that it will probably revisit one of the other Adventure Kit settings and flesh it out a little more.
Nice.
That was perfect.
But yeah, we have
It's
that.
going
And
back to Drift Chapel. I know it.
hey,
That's
listen,
my
man.
prediction.
Can neither confirm nor deny. But I will say that the cool thing is that we finished the monstrous book, and Harry said in the chat he gets his physical copy of this next week.
Yeah.
We finished A Dead Man's Guide to Dragongrin, and the truth is, man, that was it was a monument of a 3 years worth of work, but it took a lot of our time and effort to get it right. We wanted to do it right, and so now that the runway is clear, we want to start putting out more adventure kits. So hopefully it will be more frequent, and at a high level, we want to make things that make sense. So what do I mean by that? Well, you kind of have your dungeon delve with Oath of the Frozen King. Then you have your Eldritch stuff in Seaside Town with Drift Chapel. And then you have now this awesome orchard and like the surrounding hills and like a war. I know when we make the next one, we're going to say, okay, what's another thing you can bolt onto this to start building this huge world where all you're doing is just picking up the next book when it's time for game night. So yeah, we'll probably visit other places like deserts or the sea, things that would just be fun, So, but I'm excited for the next couple of years because we're going to really devote a lot of time and effort to this stuff. So the sky's the limit.
When does Harbinger come out?
Those signs that like taverns have that say free beer tomorrow and they're always on?
That's hilarious.
Listen, that is again not our news to share, but because Harbinger is more open, this is absolute. That's coming. That's coming, and I would say sooner than you might think.
Right. That's a perfect way to put it. Sooner than you might think, because
I feel like you guys have been threatening that one for a long time.
Yeah, and I'll cop to it. A Dead Man's Guide was definitely a bottleneck where we kind of had to put everything else on pause because we were such a small team making a book that usually look inside of a Wizard of the Coast book and look at the number of people that do the writing and the editing and all that stuff. Yeah. And there was 6, 7, 10 of us at a maximum at any given time. So we just have that finished. Now we're like, okay, now all the stuff we've been wanting to do also. So yeah, Harbinger is definitely foreseeable future.
Cool. I'm sure people are excited to see that. Will it be coming to Kickstarter, or are you guys going to release it?
I think the plan right now is Kickstarter.
Yeah, I think that especially look at that scope, we would need some help bringing that to reality for sure.
Yeah, it's we want to, with Harbinger especially, the art style, speaking from an art director standpoint and having worked with Barker and Matt, and we think that the aesthetic is one of the primary pillars of what makes Harbinger unique. The lore strikes this really cool tone, and the art has to make that visible to anyone who sees it. So it's not as simple as just pulling a stock sci-fi or even science fantasy element in. It's going to take a lot of work creating what Harbinger really looks like, because it's this lived in sort of science fantasy. It's got this weird place on the spectrum, and it's not as easy to just go find art online and go, oh, cool. It's more like finding an artist who can do a style and then saying, can you make something new like that?
Yeah.
And so for that reason, we like Barker said, the scope of that alone, because we could write it, but also, and we kind of had to talk about this earlier offline, but we want to include a diverse mix of playtesting, internal playtesting, and proofreaders, and make sure that there's representation in the community. And so we also want to employ people to help us with that, whether that takes the shape of sensitivity readers or freelancers and things like that. We want to also grow a diverse mix of creators, and Harbinger's the perfect project to candidly give somebody a really nice credit that they can then turn around and hopefully get another great job in the industry with. And so, so for all those reasons.
And I know that Tim was talking about this, but and pay them like more than fairly, right? Like, of
Right.
course, to get that cool credit. And of course, we're paying. More
Sure.
than fairly.
Yeah. I didn't mean what you
No,
it
totally.
probably did sound like I meant, yeah, for exposure. No,
Yeah.
pay them a wage that is higher than industry standard and have them work on a cool project they're proud of. So
Tim, there was a comment asking, is there a kind of a vehicle combat element kit? And I said that I would have you potentially chat. You mentioned I don't know how much you want to talk about it, but you mentioned the different environments like deserts, and then you mentioned the seas, and I didn't know if you.
Sure. So, okay. Okay. Me and Matt developed what turned into, they started out as naval combat rules. And then they turned into what were the void ship combat rules for 5e. And in playtesting, I think we found this really sweet spot that doesn't feel like a miniature game, but it feels like you're captaining a ship. And so we talked about an adventure kit, maybe even, and this is just, now we're just speculating, maybe even a campaign kit that lets you go off on the seas and find your way and generate different islands and locations and things like that. But we found that this rule set that is now the void ship combat can very easily translate into not only nautical vessels, but land vehicles as well. And so, the Fathoms of the Shattered Seas of Dragongrin, maybe, or maybe it's a Harbinger, treader kit where you're roaming around some vast planet in a tank. You know what I mean? Or something else. Maybe it's something in Ankea. Maybe it's one of the airships, one of the ironclad airships of Ankea, and they're doing air battle. The cool part about what we have in front of us is having the engine is the tough part. Building that first rule set of like, how do you handle vehicles in 5e in a way that doesn't feel like you're just, cumbersome. Once you get that, you can reskin it to multiple things. So I think you're going to see multiple vehicle, and if it's not a full kit, it might be like a cool rule set or something that comes out that you can plug into whatever you have going on.
Yeah, I've been wanting to run a kind of a vehicle themed game, like a little Mad Max-ish, like the overarching like theme of our campaign world that we've been playing in for forever is like the gods mess things up, and like they don't really fix it when they mess it up. They just sweep it into a pocket dimension and forget about it. And like the theme we're going with, but the problem with that is if you keep doing that, you're creating all these like configurations of arcane energy all over the place. So like a big part of our world is chaos magic just seeps in as these wards just start breaking down. And eventually we're kind of like leading up to like the world is going to just break. So I want to do this campaign I'm just calling Under the Dome, where it's like now all the cities are under these biospheres and everything outside of it is just chaos wastes. And it's a little inspired by Descent into Avernus with their vehicles, but I'm like, I don't want to power it with souls, but instead with something I'm calling the grind, which is just like stuff that they grind up that's been infused with chaos magic. And like even in the world we play in, like where it currently is, like these chaos storms will happen, and then prospectors follow them to like scoop up any of the stuff that got infused with chaos magic, and then you then resell that stuff. So that makes me think of that. I definitely want to play with that, some Mad Max, and for some reason I need partially reptilian humanoid chinchilla gangsters in this world.
That's a very specific thing.
Chinchilla.
Well, we have a couple chinchillas, and
I love it.
And they're dicks, right? Like one is like there's nothing a chinchilla can't chew through unless it's steel or glass. And like they used to have these ramps before they ate them that they would climb up and down on. And like one would be climbing up and down and the other one would be grabbing it from one side or the other and trying to flip them off. of the ramp, because they got like these little hands, right, which are adorable and they're super soft. But when you see how they treat each other, they're just little jerks. And like every morning, you'll come down because they're nocturnal, and it just looks like they've had a frat party in their cage.
Matted hair and
Yeah.
I'm super into that chaos magic, and then the those that seek it as well. I don't know how much time we've got left, but I wanted to talk a little bit about the Variophage. It's a new monster in this kit, and it's based on the idea that Enkea is a land of hyper magic, infrastructural magic. The secure, more than safe, use of magic in order to increase the growth of an orchard, to feed the surrounding area, to maintain the climate of a certain region, to accelerate research about the planes and how to create your own synthetic planes of existence. That seems like high magic, but you don't see that on the ground. It's not flamboyant magic. It's not in your face at all times, which makes it easy to reskin. But this byproduct of magic, maybe an overabundance of magic, is the Variophage, which is on the cover of the Battle for Arctur's Vault. It's this crystalline, it's a crystalline spider, we'll call it, a kind of virus that takes up this form from the overabundance of magic and forms nests around what's called a chrysalis. And the cool thing about these things is that when they all die, the chrysalis dies, and it's this kind of crystalline power source. And so there are people who want to find it or secure it so it doesn't fall in the wrong hands. What could someone who wants to open a vault filled with ancient weapons, what could they do with something like this? What if I want to ground up this crystal into a fine powder and use it alchemically? The idea behind Enkea is magic isn't just dangerous, it's apocalyptic. So we can't let these things fall into the wrong hands. Anyway, the cool thing about the Variophage, and this is why Dave, you can have your reptilian chinchilla gangster, because once the Variophage dies or is cut off from its magic source, instead of just dying right there, it morphs, it mutates into any magical creature. Specifically random magical creatures. Nice. That magic needs some place to go. And so, boom, owlbear. All right, what if the Battle for Arctur's Vault is happening and you have all of these troops fighting these Variophages, the chrysalis is destroyed or something happens, and all at once, now instead of fighting an army of Variophages, or phages for short, you're fighting a flame elemental, a pterodactyl, you're fighting an owlbear. One of these things turns into a mimic. It allows you to unleash chaos or pick any monster from the monster manual, really, and throw it at the characters.
For no reason. Absolutely awesome.
And if you want to see that transformation visually, it's on the Kickstarter page. Click in the link below, and there's actually midway down, you'll see this crystalline monster transforming in 3 phases into what is about to be an owlbear. And we're clear too. We worked on a set of rules to make that work so that you're not turning one single Variophage into this huge red dragon. Like, there is a gated system of size and power levels where you need a certain amount to make a certain amount of things. So there's also a cool element of, if there's one, as Barker said, oh no, it's an owlbear, we can handle that. But if you see 6, 7, 8, 10 start sort of linking up together, you might have a red dragon on the way. That's kind of the cool nature of it is,
oh, nice.
You can scale it to your table and still have that polar bear on Lost Island. Like if you're in a desert region, but you really just found this cool monster that you want to run, the Variophage is like the perfect way to do it in game, where it makes sense. And the players have enough information that it doesn't feel unfair. They're like, oh no, we have to kill this thing before it transforms into whatever,
It makes me think of something that I recently discovered, right? Like, you guys know what NFTs are?
Yes.
No, I've heard it, and I kind of know, but
they've got video games now, basically games based off of NFTs. And it's like, I don't know, like if any of you play or you know anyone who plays a stupid like monster breeding, dragon breeding, any
Oh,
kind of
sure.
these like
Yeah, I
stupid
haven't
pay to
played it.
play. Yeah.
I know what you mean.
A lot
Dragon
of my
Island and stuff. Yeah.
yeah, a lot of my family does. Well, now they have them and they're connected to NFTs and actual money, Ethereum, which is money. So like, it made me think of that. Like, you could do your whole thing, man. I think there's a blockchain avenue for you guys to build your world where these crystals things can turn into stuff, can combine and breed, and you'll be millionaires, billionaires.
It's the truth. And if anybody wants to learn about NFTs in a light, fun way, go to YouTube and type in SNL, so Saturday Night Live, NFT. It's a Pete Davidson music video, and it's hilarious. I watch it like once a week.
Yeah, I got a buddy that's playing one of those games. I think it's Axia Infinity or something. And like, there's a bunch of people that do it, and they hire people from like the Philippines and stuff to play the game, and like run the quests and breed these monsters, and like it's built into the game where they like get a percentage. It's weird. I don't know. The future is weird. And it's going to be all gaming everywhere, but for real money. Yeah, Brian Smith, it's Neopets, but for like lots of money. Like, I think you need like $300 to buy one of the like stupid eggs.
You had me at Neopets, Brian.
Yeah. It's Neopets with real world consequences.
Do they have reptilian chinchilla gangsters?
That's the question, right?
The NFT
what all of our minds.
chinchilla gangsters.
But yeah, that was just a random thought I had when I hear you talking about them changing, combining. I'm like, this could be the basis for a whole new NFT game. You guys are sitting on millions.
I was kind of thinking that like certain, we'll just call them, I don't really know what they're called, but they're like people who can go to, like gyms and take their variophages, and like we'll just say they hypothetically put them in like a ball, like a void that the variophage stays in, and then they duel each other. Listen, this is all pretty groundbreaking, I'm sure. I don't want to talk too much about it because someone will take the idea and then it will turn to ash.
Oh my god, so bad.
Hey, thanks, Dave. Thanks for this.
Yeah, man. I appreciate you having us on.
I appreciate you guys coming on and telling us what's going on. So do you guys have in-house games going on?
As it like home groups?
Play testing.
Do you mean like home groups?
Yeah,
in-house games like so with each other, we just had our Provokers session 0 kind of recap, so we're going to pick that up again. I'm running actually this week, this Friday, I'm running the Battle for Arctur's Vault using the Mecha Hack. So we're reskinning this hyper magic fantasy adventure kit, some elements of it, to super robots on a space station. And that's looking fun. And I have a home group that I sadly have, what's the word? Neglected because for this, but which is great news now because it's all going to be play testing for them. It's nice to have a home group that you can just shove your stuff on, and so they don't know what's coming.
And I have 2 home groups right now that we're both using what we're calling Iron Grin, which is a sort of work in progress. We're turning Sean Tompkins' Ironsworn and we're like reskinning it for Dragon Grin, just because the mechanics of Ironsworn are so easy for a new player to immediately grok that it's like, oh, we were up and running. And I did that to avoid having to make 5 character sheets for each group and then basically play the game for them each turn.
Yeah.
With Ironsworn, it's like, oh, okay, what do I add? And I roll. Okay, yeah, I got this. And I'm like, oh, cool. All right, strong hit. This is what happens. So I've got 2 of those going with absolute beginners. No one has played RPGs at all in any of those groups, and it's going very well. And then online, I'm running the ever-growing Shadows of Grin, which is like this big sort of like living Dragon Grin campaign. I've only run 1 session in it because it's been pretty hectic, but I plan on running more where each group is like an episode and they have to kind of inform each other what's happening. I'm not giving campaign notes or anything. And what one group does affects others in ways, but it's just this cool way to play in Dragon Grin sandboxy.
Wait, did you say 5 groups of new players? Can we back up?
Sorry, no. 2. I would have to create 5 character sheets for each group because there's 5 in each. So it's 2 groups that have 5 people each.
Okay. I just misheard.
Yeah.
But still, that's still a lot. That's still a lot of new players. Where are you pulling all these new players from? What's your source, man?
Yeah, no. So it's just, here's what happened. In the pandemic, people learned what RPGs were. And I didn't teach them, but they found out. And then they all found out that I play D&D.
Oh.
And then, check out this funny moment. These people I play racquetball with or played racquetball with prior to the pandemic, and would hang out with, I get a message from one of them like, yo, you play D&D? And I'm like, yeah. And they send me the link to the Tabletop Terrors Learn to Play D&D video. So a handful of them were like, oh my God, that's Tim.
Yeah.
And so they
added you, man.
They jumped me. They were like, hey, I know you run games. Can you do that for us? So then I was like, okay, cool. Well, then some other people that we know who similar circle, they're like, yo, I heard you were running a game for them. And I was like, yeah. And then I realized, I'm like, oh, wow, there's a sub pocket of other people who we used to play like board games with and stuff.
Yeah.
So like Secret Hitler and Pandemic and things like that. So they were like, hey, I mean, come on. And so then I was like, okay, because it's essentially I run 1 a month for each.
Yeah.
So I don't I run 1 and alternate. So I don't play 2 sessions a month with them. It's like, okay, this month is this group. And it's perfect because they're busy anyway. All of us are kind of busy.
You rock the Nerdarchy method. We've been doing that for the past 8 years.
Is that so that I'm using the Nerdarchy.
We just have multiple groups that me and Ted play with on different days of the week because no one can commit to every Saturday night. Only weirdos like us are playing weekly. But a lot of other people, you can get them for 1 night a month, and
exactly,
it's kept our group so much more consistent than they've ever been in the past 30 years, 20 years.
Yeah, and these are because they're new, they're very excited.
Yeah.
So you're in that phase where they're asking me when we're playing next.
Yeah.
And that's not always the case with experienced players who are in 3 other games and who are trying to find oh my God, I got a game tonight, I forgot. There's none of that. So I'm the main source. So they're like, hey, when can we play again? So we're still in that honeymoon, which is kind of nice.
When can we get some game in? When
yeah.
Those D20s.
Exactly.
So no, that's super cool. I guess we're just past the hour mark, so we should probably wrap this up. But I enjoyed talking to you guys. So final thoughts before we head on out?
Just appreciate everyone that's trusted us with this Kickstarter. It's a niche. It looks on the surface like a niche setting and not something that everyone would be into. But thank you for trusting us that it is completely reskinnable and useful for any game that you want to just chuck the characters into a cinematic bit of mass combat with high stakes in the surrounding region of Adrian Pass. Just, thanks for everyone for supporting us. Thank you for your support if you see this video and back. And thank you, Dave, for inviting us on to just kind of, I love hanging out with you because we're just shooting the shit and talking about games. And I love that.
Yeah. And I'll just echo that and say that I know because we wrote a lot of these encounters as a group. We would jump into a Zoom and there were so many things that we wrote. It doesn't matter what setting you're playing in. There are some really cool encounters in there that are unique and flexible outside of any lore. I could just go, hey, here you go, run this with a Google Doc, and you would have a blast. So just to echo what Barker says, don't miss out because that plus the mass combat will give you a ton of mileage no matter what world you're playing in. But if you're also looking for a new setting, if you're also looking for something that's you know what, I'm kind of just trying to start something. And what do I want? What am I doing? You're looking for the place you're going to eat dinner tonight. Ankea is a really good place because it challenges you. It's easy to understand, but it's different than what you've experienced before. So it makes you think, oh, well, if magic was everywhere, how would the world work? And so it does a lot of the world building for you. And I'll just say that to finish, even if you make your own, if you make Blenkea, you still have all the hard work done of Barker, who's like a history enthusiast and student, who has laced this whole kit and this world with Cold War tensions and real conflict. That's like, wow, that's really ripe. Get the kit and you'll see what we're talking about.
Awesome. As always, folks, links are in the description. Go click away, check it out, check out the Kickstarter. And until next time, stay nerdy.
Stay nerdy and don't get murdered.
Stay nerdy.
Stay nerdy.